All right, folks. What we're going to do now is we're going to do the gem. And then we're going to take a brief break. And then Joshua Kahn in studio is going to join us. I'm very excited about this. Sorry for banging the table.
So this is actually pretty interesting. A report that just came out in Los Angeles about a new strategy that Silicon Valley companies and just companies in general are using to try to subvert any kind of basic workers' protections, workers' rights in general.
Sure.
GetAround, if you're not familiar with it, is a company that allows users to rent out their cars. They have employees, though, who are basically moving the cars around. And, of course, they were not considering these employees, as employees. They were considering them to be independent contractors, despite the fact that they wore uniforms, they didn't make their own schedule, they had to go to training, and they were assigned shifts. So anyways, this is going on for a few years, and there starts to become a movement that there's basically going to become a class action suit against the company.
Awesome.
Well, the company begins sending out checks to these workers, and you got to remember that many of these people are low-wage workers, so they're sending out, $300, $400, $500 in some cases, around $1,000 to $2,000 to people, and saying, just sign this little sheet of paper. And of course, the sheet of paper was encouraging these workers to sign away all of their legal rights. They were hoping to squash this class action lawsuit. The company then was informed by their counsel that the sheet of paper that they had all these people sign was too broad, and actually would not be able to hold up in court because it was so egregious and offensive to any kind of decency or understanding of law. So then the company contacted all these people, offered them around $100 to sign another waiver, and threatened them, though, that if they did not sign this, they would sue them for the money that they took in the first place. So now we need to recognize what it's like for those workers. If you are, already working a kind of low wage gig job, you get a couple $100. And for most people who are working paycheck to paycheck, that gives you a little bit of breathing room. So it's something that is very attractive to people. This is a tactic that's used by a company by GetAround because it's significantly cheaper than paying out the overall cost of a successful lawsuit that would really challenge the abusive practices of GetAround. So just to give us the context of this, GetAround paid out a total of $145,000, while the legal settlement is estimated to be somewhere around, if it went through, $1.6 million. So the company understands that their workers are pressed for cash and that many workers will forego their legal rights. And this is something that we're seeing more and more across the country as much more work becomes centralized into a few corporations, especially all these kind of gig work. So you're talking about delivery drivers, Uber, things like that. One company can basically push around an entire sector of workers who are atomized because they're not necessarily working with one another. And oftentimes these are temporary workers. Just talking about temporary workers in general, interns, according to a new Wall Street Journal report, are increasingly being forced to sign non-compete clauses. Which, obviously, the entire intern system in the U.S. is a problem, especially unpaid internships. But this, just like
I never knew feudalism would be so funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing because it slaps in the face the entire neoliberal logic of interns in the first place, is to get some experience so that you can go and take it somewhere else. And obviously, people have seen, there's a really interesting report in the New York Times, a story about a reporter who worked as a DoorDash delivery person that came out over the weekend. I highly suggest you read it. And obviously, everyone's been talking about, again, what's going on at DoorDash, where they're taking the tips to subsidize the wages that they're paying for the workers. So, if they're getting paid, $12 for a delivery, you pay them $5. DoorDash is just basically taking themselves off the hook for the $7 that they would have to pay these workers.
Yeah, naturally.
And this is a major problem.
Capitalism's bad, folks.
No, I mean,
we tried it. It's not working. It's not
really
working.
bad.
It's not a good system.
But we also need to recognize what this means. It's like, so these are all these kind of legal rules that these companies are getting around, are all things that were hard-fought, won victories of the labor movement across the country. But what happens when, working people aren't organized together, aren't basically in communication with each other, and are in such precarious work that they're sort of transitory, they become abused. But also the way that a lot of these corporations are trying to use, legal finagling to get out of any kind of legal protection for the workers is really bad, and it's becoming all too common. So private sector non-union employees, 56.2% of them are subject to mandatory employment arbitration procedures, right? This is from the Economic Policy Institute. So this is, again, you're foregoing your rights to a trial so that they can find an arbiter to figure out, your situation. 30.1% of those workers also include class action
figure
waivers.
out that situation.
We're going to figure it out for you.
Gotta take a look at it.
Situation being, here's a few scraps.
Situation being, sorry, not gonna pay you.
And, this is a significant part of the economy. 24.7 million American workers no longer have the right. And of course, there are ways to get out of this, but just, they'd have to go through a long legal process to go forward with a class action lawsuit. 24.7 million American workers, signed away their right to bring a class action claim if their employment rights have been violated. So this is really common in low-wage workplaces. It is much more common in industries that are composed of women workers, people of color, and again, low-wage workers. So this is our legal system being skewed to dominate, into the benefit of the wealthiest people and the most powerful organizations in the United States. And from legal weakness to precarity, corporations are using the poor situation of their workers that they create by paying them such low wages to maintain that domination over people. Just the other week, Uber and Lyft were revealed to be paying their drivers to show up at protests that were pushing for more regulations on the industry. And again, we're talking $100, $200, but when people need cash, they're going to accept it.
Right.
Fighting poverty must mean that we're fighting the power of bosses. And that means that we need to really be talking and creating movements that unite people. That's why movements, for example, like the Fight for 15 is so much bigger than just raising the minimum wage. That's creating class power and solidarity and those kind of unions and organizations that people need to be able to work in unison against a system that's trying to make them work as individual actors. And as long as they're working as individual actors, they're going to be completely abused by the system.
You've just watched a Michael Brooks show video, and you can watch all of our full main live shows every Tuesday night at around 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and subscribe to get all of the clips you want. We're covering the globe. We're focusing on international relations, the intellectual dark web. We're having fun. We're doing deep dives with a lot of amazing guests. Of course, become a patron for the whole thing at patreon.com/TMBS, or subscribe to this YouTube channel and help us keep growing and get that content out there. Subscribe below.